currently late, but still Earth. On July 16th in 1769, Father Junipero Serra, a Franciscan missionary, founded the first Catholic mission in California on the site of present-day San Diego. After Serra blessed his new outpost of Christianity in a high mass, the royal standard of Spain was unfurled over the mission, which he named San Diego de Alcala. Serra came to Spanish America in 1750 and served in the Sierra Gorda missions and then in South Central Mexico. A successful missionary, he was appointed a member of the Second Spanish Land Expedition to Alta California in 1769. When the party reached San Diego, Serra remained with a few followers to found California's first mission. The rest of the expedition continued on in search of Monterey Harbor, which had been previously used by Spanish sailors. Although the explorers failed in their aim, Serra succeeded in finding Monterey in 1770, and there he founded his second mission, San Carlos Borromeo. Appointed president of the Alta California Presidios, Serra eventually founded a total of 9 missions, stretching from San Diego to present-day San Francisco. The Franciscan father built large communities around their missions, teaching Christianized Native Americans to farm and tend cattle, and directing their work. These agricultural communities enjoyed a considerable autonomy from the first Spanish colonial authorities and then the Mexican government. But with the coming of the Americans in the mid-19th century, most were abandoned. On July 16th in 1790, the Young American Congress declares that a swampy, humid, muddy, and mosquito-infested site on the Potomac River between Maryland and Virginia will be the nation's permanent capital. Washington, in the newly designated Federal District of Columbia, was named after the leader of the American Revolution and the country's first president, George Washington. It was Washington who saw the area's potential economic and accessibility benefits due to the proximity of navigable rivers. George Washington, who had been in office just over a year when the capital site was determined, asked a French architect and city planner named Pierre l'Enfant to design the capital. In 1793, the first cornerstones of the President's Mansion, which eventually renamed the White House, were laid. George Washington, however, never lived in the mansion, and it was not inhabitable until 1800. Instead, our second president, John Adams, and his wife, Abigail Adams, were the White House's first residents. They lived there less than a year. Thomas Jefferson moved in 1801. On July 16th in 1863, the draft riots entered their fourth day in New York City in response to the Enrollment Act, which was enacted on March 3rd, 1863. Although avoiding military service became much more difficult, wealthier citizens could still pay a commutation fee of $300 to stay at home. Irritation with the draft dovetailed with opposition to the Emancipation Proclamation of September 1862, which made abolition of slavery the central goal of the war for the Union. Particularly vocal in their opposition were the Democratic Irish, who felt the war was being forced upon them by Protestant Republicans and feared that emancipation of formerly enslaved people would jeopardize their jobs. Discontent simmered until the draft began among the Irish New Yorkers on July 11th. 2 days later, a mob burned the draft office, triggering nearly 5 days of violence. At first, the targets included local newspapers, wealthy homes, well-dressed men, and police officers. But the crowd's attention soon turned to African Americans. Several black people were lynched, and businesses employing black people were burned. A black orphanage was also burned, but the children escaped. Not until July 17th was the violence contained by the arrival of Union troops, some fresh from the battlefield at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. More than 1,000 people continued their eternity, and property damage topped 2 million. The draft was temporarily suspended, and a revised conscription began in August. As a result of the riots and the delicate political balance in the city, relatively few New Yorkers were forced to serve in the Union Army. On July 16th in 1945, at 5:29 a.m., the Manhattan Project yields explosive results as the first atom bomb is successfully tested in Alamogordo, New Mexico. Plans for the creation of a uranium bomb by the Allies were established as early as 1939 when Italian immigrant physicist Enrico Fermi met with U.S. Navy Department officials at Columbia University to discuss the use of fissionable materials for military purposes. That same year, Albert Einstein signed a letter to President Franklin Roosevelt, our 32nd president, supporting the theory that an uncontrolled nuclear chain reaction had great potential as a basis for a weapon of mass destruction. Eisenhower was our 34th president, and our 33rd was Truman. In February 1940, the federal government granted a total of $6,000 for research. But in early 1942, with the United States now at war with the Axis powers and fear mounting that Germany was working on its own uranium bomb, the War Department took a more active interest, and limits on resources for the project were removed. Brigadier General Leslie R. Groves, himself an engineer, was now in complete charge of a project to assemble the greatest minds in science and discover how to harness the power of the atom as a means of bringing the war to a decisive end. The Manhattan Project, so called because of where the research began, would wind its way through many locations during early period of theoretical exploration. Most importantly, the University of Chicago, where Enrico Fermi successfully set off the first fission chain reaction. But the project took final form in the desert of New Mexico, where in 1943, Robert J. Oppenheimer began directing Project Y at a laboratory at Los Alamos, along with such minds as Hans Bethe, Edward Teller, and Fermi. Here, theory and practice came together as the problems of achieving critical mass, a nuclear explosion, and the construction of a deliverable bomb were worked out. Finally, on the morning of July 16th, in the New Mexico desert 120 miles south of Santa Fe, the first atomic bomb was detonated. The scientists and a few dignitaries had removed themselves 10,000 yards away to observe as the first mushroom cloud of searing light stretched 40,000 feet into the air and generated a destructive power of 15,000 to 20,000 tons of TNT. The tower on which the bomb sat when detonated was vaporized. All historic information documented on this audio file can be verified on History.com, and I urge all my listeners to visit History.com to read. There are dissenting opinions on some of the historical facts I divulge. For example, the death toll on the draft riots. Wikipedia counts 100 to 200 people, while History.com counts up to 1,000. I would also urge you to visit History.com to learn about the unsung Black Americans who helped with the construction of the atomic bomb.